going live. Okay.
Okay.
That is the case.
Yeah, come on.
Very good.
We're not quite there yet, but
Okay.
So as soon as we go live.
All right, you're live, Denise.
we are live.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're continuing a conversation that we started last year involving a certain FERC order that was the subject of a lot of discussion last session. And this is, again, a continuation of a pretty important topic for our state. And so, you know, with that said, let's get right to it. I think on the agenda, we were going to start with a panel from the Public Service Commission. We've got Miles Mitchell, who's the Deputy General Counsel, Morris Schreim, who's Senior Commission Advisor, and Lisa Smith, who is the Director of Legislative Affairs. So I'm not certain if you all have organized amongst yourselves as to who is going to go first, but or if you're all speaking, I'll leave it up to you. But this is the Public Service Commission of Maryland's panel. And so I will, I guess, I don't know if it's Miles Mitchell there. Or Lisa.
Yes,
Okay.
Good afternoon. Miles Mitchell, Deputy General Counsel for the Maryland Public Service Commission. And we coordinated with this with Lisa Smith, our Legislative Director, and she's going to introduce Maura Schreim, who's going to provide the presentation for the Public Service Commission.
Okay.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you, Senator, and nice to see everyone again. We will try to keep this brief, although there has been quite a bit happening since we last met before our session ended early. So I did bring along Morris Schreim, our Senior Advisor, who focuses on PJM and FERC issues and lives this day in and day out. And Miles Mitchell, who you just heard from, is our Deputy General Counsel. He'll, after Morris provides a presentation with a rundown of what the latest is and where we are and what the PSC has been involved with at FERC, Miles will be available to address and answer any questions about the judicial appeal, and as he is handling that for the commission. So hopefully with this team here today, you'll be able to ask any questions of the PSC, and I'm obviously available for follow-up or any questions. Thanks for having us.
Okay, well, thanks, Lisa.
And I'll let Morris take it away.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm clear.
Okay, I'm hearing a lot of feedback. So.
Okay, make sure everybody, if you're not speaking, everybody, you know, mute yourself, so we minimize the possibility of a loop back or feedback. So, Morris, I think most everybody is muted. So, other than myself, and I will do the same. So, why don't you proceed?
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Yes. Yeah, thank you very much for having us participate. This is a very important issue, and I think, as Bob mentioned, a lot has happened since the last time the board met.
Morris, can you? I don't think we can hear you. Can you?
Apologies, I'm trying to let Morris know that there's a connection issue.
Yeah, Morris, we seem to be having hopefully you can hear me. We seem to be having some type of connection issue with you. And you're not muted, so I'm not certain. Hold on a second. Okay, well, I am not a technical expert on, I'd like to be able to wave a wand and solve this. Does our crack whip ECM/finance backup team have any thoughts as to why Morris cannot be heard?
turn off your video. Sometimes that helps the projection.
Yeah, it might be taking up the bandwidth.
Also, he may not be on connected to the audio. So that's just another suggestion if he's unmuted.
Okay, Morris, those are some thoughts. I'm not, again, sure what the issue is. If we go too much longer, maybe we can come back to you if we can figure out, maybe it's even requiring you to call in or something. Let's take another minute or two, Morris, and see if you can figure out another way on here. Otherwise, we may try to go to a plan B here.
Well, Lisa, if we want to stay on track and put up the slides, and perhaps Morris can answer when we come back if you want, or
Okay,
PJM
so
can go.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? Why don't we had a slide up momentarily, and so maybe we could put that back up, and somebody else, maybe either Lisa or Miles or somebody,
Yeah, if we go
walk
on
through
to
at
the
least.
slide. Let's go on to slide 2. Okay, so we're gonna do
Morris is definitely having connection issues, so he cannot connect. I'm sorry, Miles.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Let me call
Okay, all right. So this, as I think was noted at the set, this is about mobile. You've had work group meetings that have discussed this already. So we're not going to go through the rock and roll of the history of where we are here. There were complaints that were filed at PJM with regard to. There's a lot of subsidies. We've always tried to refer to the state's involvement in the capacity market as state policy preferences. We typically try to avoid the suggesting that these are subsidies, because the way we look the existing fleet and nuclear fleet that's within the PJM capacity market receive some subsidies. But there was a jump ball filing by PJM was offering something called MOPR X and an alternative to MOPR X. And FERC decided not to select either of them, and instead decided in the 2018 order to basically say that the existing capacity market construct in PJM is unjust and unreasonable, and required a new filing by PJM to essentially establish a replacement rate for the pre-existing capacity market construct. Can you go on to the next slide, please? I think I've pretty much talked about that. So after the June 2018 order was, PJM and the parties filed a hearing to essentially develop, in response to June 2018 order, a place. PJM within FERC issued order 5 November of 2019 on the replacement rate, saying that the pre-existing rate was unjust and unreasonable, and that this new replacement rate, which suggested that a FRR alternative could be used to allow state preferred resources to participate in their fixed resource market, could be used, but that anything that was in the market prior to the December order, anything that came into the capacity market after the December order, had to be subject to MOPR if it was receiving any type of state subsidy or was a preferred resource of the state. Then filed a compliance filing and a second compliance filing, and then a rehearing order was issued, largely reaffirming the December order. And then as of October, just a week and a half ago, FERC issued its compliance order. The compliance order doesn't answer all questions, but it does give PJM somewhat of a roadmap to proceed. There is, I think it was discussed during the FERC open meeting, another docket that FERC has to address offer floor. PJM can really develop the parameters of auction. PJM had proposed that its next auction would be 6.5 months, the compliance order. If you use that, we would have thought PJM might have considered having an auction in early May of 2021. But with this requirement that FERC has to issue an order on the default offer floor, price offer floor, that would put the next auction back to either June or July of 2021. So we're not sure. PJM has more to answer on that. Can you move to the next slide? Is there a next slide?
Okay, we need a next slide, somebody here. There we go.
Okay. A lot of this we've covered, except I would note that at the bottom of the slide, there is a competitive carve-out auction. This was a proposal that the Maryland Commission made as an alternative to the fixed resource requirement accommodation that FERC has suggested. A competitive auction would have eventually allowed the state preferred resources to participate in a different auction prior to the capacity market auction. And then the outcome of the competitive carve-out auction would have then led into or been accommodated by PJM in the capacity market. So there would not have been any duplication of research. And if the cleared the competitive carve-out auction, they would basically be presumed to be competitive resources that would not need to be subject to MOPR in a capacity market. Rejected, not with a whole lot of discussion, but rejected the competitive carve-out auction and basically any other alternative to the FRR alternative and the MOPR. So it was something that was fashioned by the Maryland Commission. I owe a lot of credit to Morris for creatively designing this, and we tried to work with PJM to consider how it would work. PJM gave it some favorable nods, but it wasn't ultimately something that PJM formally supported, and FERC obviously didn't adopt it. Can we move on so we can move on as quickly as we can to the next presenter? Notably, Commissioner Glick dissented in the December 2019 order. A couple of concerns were his dissent. One, the way FERC sort of gave a very broad reading of state subsidy or state preferred resources could mean that the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which Maryland is a part of, might be subject to MOPR. And it also had included the standard offer service program as subject to potentially, or in fact, subject to MOPR. We actually requested rehearing of both the RGGI concern and the SOS concern. And I think either a slide further along may discuss the SOS, but in the October order, FERC granted part on the SOS. So far as I can tell, they were silent on the RGGI. Most folks did not really think that that the MOPR was intended to apply to, and suggested that FERC that was raised by Commissioner Glick wasn't meant by FERC to cover. But in the October order, FERC did grant part on the SOS and acknowledged that state standard offer service programs, unless they were specifically intended to include an RPS requirement for the purposes of resource selection, would not need to be subject to MOPR. So we think that again, there's a lot of discussion back and forth among us right now as to, there was a footnote in the order that has raised a number of questions that we're looking at more closely. Next slide.
Miles, this is Morris. Can you hear me?
Yes. Take it away, Morris.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. What slide number are we on now?
We're on the subsidy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Miles, and for filling in. And I apologize to everyone. I was hearing the introduction on a do loop over and over again, so I'm sorry about that. So I'll take you to slide 6. I think Miles was discussing the general nature of the definition of a state subsidy and the overall concerns that were expressed specifically by Commissioner Glick and his dissent. And he had indicated that the reach and the definition was so broad that it could include programs like RGGI and the default service provider or programs like our SOS program. And so we filed a rehearing request, and again, mostly to make sure that we're protecting our state policies. We brought up again the issue of jurisdiction, the just and reasonableness of the FERC order. They had not addressed cost impacts. We made a case why RGGI should not be considered a subsidy. We also asked about the carve-out auction that we had proposed as an alternative, of which FERC did not really address at all in the order. And we wanted some clarity. There are other orders that FERC have that could allow us to incentivize certain resources another way. About a decade ago, FERC had issued an order that would promote public policy transmission. It would allow states to develop programs that would incentivize or subsidize transmission. And we wanted clarification that this order would not prevent, would not cause a resource or generator that interconnected to a state policy transmission project or a subsidized transmission project. It would not consider that resource as a subsidized resource. And again, we try to stress the inequity of the RPS definition for exemptions that FERC had put forth in their order. They had tied it directly to specific processes and steps within the interconnection process at PJM. We believe that there are other matters that would also could be put in place that would provide certainty to generators regarding the likelihood of operating. We had already issued an order for 2 of our offshore wind facilities. One of them had gone through the PJM interconnection process, one had not, but since an order had existed, we wanted clarification that that process was good enough in exempting previous RPS projects. In March of 2020, PJM followed up to the December order. They identified offer floor prices. They came up with a process for unit-specific exemption. Floor prices are default prices for a type of generator, but they put in a provision that would allow a specific generator owner to look at the different parameters that are used in assessing what the floor prices would be and make them unique to them. And perhaps with that, they would be able to offer a lower price than the default. PJM also, in their compliance filing, stressed that RGGI would not be considered a subsidy, and that our SOS type program, and specifically they included our SOS program in the tariff language, would not be part of a subsidy. But I think, as I heard Miles mention at the end, some things had changed since then. FERC was supportive of us regarding our public policy transmission request, and they also put in a schedule, and I don't think the schedule has really changed. PJM's intent is to implement the next auction 6.5 months after receiving a clean compliance order from FERC. So in April 2020, FERC issued an order on rehearing and denied rehearing to their previous orders. And they provided clarifications. They indicated they would allow the flexibility that PJM had put forth in their compliance filing. They indicated that RGGI is not a subsidy, and they would address the public policy transmission issue later, but they indicated that SOS could be considered a subsidy based on their broad definition. And then they ordered PJM to come up with a second compliance filing. And in May, in May, we also sent in other comments on the PJM compliance filing, agreeing that RGGI is not a subsidy. SOS should not be, and we explained what SOS is, and we also supported the unit-specific exemptions and a few other matters. But we also, recognizing this was May, we were in the middle of the pandemic and schedules has shifted considerably. We wanted to make sure that whatever schedules were implemented and approved by FERC would allow time for states to legislate or regulate if changes to the paradigm were needed. So there have been some further actions since then. PJM filed its compliance filing in June with regard to the April 2020 order, and they provide a very specific language clarifying what SOS is and or the default service is, and the language really mirrors our programs here in the state. And FERC issued an order since then, and this was just last week. And I think Miles was also discussing that there was this question about SOS, about a footnote. As I think you may have mentioned, we're still taking a look at the order, but our initial review with the specific language that PJM suggested for the tariff that FERC has approved, and coupled with the statements that FERC makes in that footnote that they perceive the New Jersey program based on some FAQs on the New Jersey website to be there for the purpose of making sure that certain resource is clear. That is certainly not the purpose of our SOS program. And I think a lot of folks are talking about that footnote. If you take a look at 2 footnotes later, FERC makes a comment that they're not quite sure why a state would have a default service program without selecting specific resources. And Commissioner Glick, in his dissent, also puts in a footnote that it's very clear that FERC really doesn't understand what the state retail program is about. So PJM now has been ordered to file a second compliance filing. That's a 30-day filing, so we expect that next month. And one of the missing parts of this is we know that FERC would like to have resources that are receiving payments outside of their markets, outside of their administrative markets, to be subject to this price threshold. The key question is, what exactly is the threshold? So there's another issue that came up in the interim, and PJM had filed at FERC a process to change the way the energy and reserve prices, those short-term or spot market prices, are handled. And in that change, FERC recognized that there is an inconsistency with the way that would be handled and the way that the capacity market is run. The capacity market is run based on a historical look back at energy prices and reserve prices, and subtracting from that what the generator needs to be profitable. That is basically what is necessary for the generator in the capacity market. But with this new reserve pricing paradigm, there's the possibility that reserve and energy prices in the short term would increase. So the balance of what's necessary in the capacity market could decrease. And if that's the case, then those thresholds that PJM had filed before would not be appropriate. And FERC has ordered PJM to find a way to forecast this offset. And once that is approved, then that could be used to determine what the thresholds are. So that FERC order is not out yet, and we're all waiting for that. And I'm sure the next question is, so when will the auction occur? And if you recall, it indicated that 6.5 months after receiving a clean order. So even if today FERC were to issue an order on this pricing reserves issue, and recognizing the administrative process, by the time FERC would even issue an order, assuming everything is clean, it would probably be sometime in the middle of December. And still, we don't know when they will issue an order on this pricing reserve. And if you count from the middle of December, 6.5 months, it takes you to about July 1st. So that is probably the earliest that could be. But still, there are a lot of unknowns. The next slide, slide 12, is the judicial appeal, and I think Miles was going to speak regarding that, but I guess since he lifted most of it for me, I'll just mention that after the order on rehearing in April, parties had 60 days to consider appeal of the order in federal court, and we filed along with many
but
circuit. And
it's,
FERC has not filed a record on this yet. Go ahead, Miles.
right, yeah. I think you were saying that where we are right now on the appeal with New Jersey in the DC circuit, and there was another filing in the 7th Circuit by the Illinois Commerce Commission. Their filing in the Illinois in the 7th Circuit actually first. So there were petitions in the DC circuit. There were back and forth in the DC in that case. Now, those cases have been transferred from the DC circuit to the 7th Circuit. However, FERC has not yet filed a record in the Court of Appeals. And until FERC files, we won't have a briefing schedule for the case. But anticipate that with all the transfers taking place this week, that FERC will file the record in the 7th Circuit within the next 30 days, a briefing schedule that will begin us on the briefing process in December and January of 2020.
Thank you, Miles. So I think that pretty much wraps up our presentation. And again, apologize for all the technical problems, but I hope that was well understood. And if there are any questions, we're happy to address those.
So we don't have a raise flag function. It looks a raise your hand function here, but we only have, I think I see Delegate Brooks and Charkoudian from ECM, from Economic Matters, and Senators Augustine and Hershey, I think, were the only members from the Finance Committee. So if any of my legislative colleagues would like to ask a question, why don't you just raise your hand in your camera and we'll go to you. And we're going to start with Delegate Charkoudian, so you can unmute yourself.
Hey, Senator Jennings is on the phone. He can't be on video.
Okay, and Senator Jennings, who cannot be on video. I have a vision of what's involved there, but I'm not going to say. Okay, Delegate Charkoudian.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here and for putting the presentation together. And I know that some of the information is still sort of fresh. I wanted to ask you to speak to two specific things. I am really concerned about this SOS question, and it sounds like the only reason that we might say that New Jersey is different from Maryland, or maybe you can speak to how New Jersey structurally is different from Maryland. As I understand it, the footnote and the argument, separate from whatever might be personal between the FERC chair and the New Jersey chair, the actual footnote in the legal argument is potentially tied to something on their website that's related to intent. It sounds like that's sort of the case that's being made about why they would their SOS would fall under the MOPR and ours wouldn't. But I tend to agree with Glick in my alarm at the definitions, and specifically the definitions of a non-bypassable consumer charge then tied to an action mandated by the state, which essentially, as our SOS market includes rec payments, I think it does potentially fall under there unless FERC is explicitly stating that that it doesn't. So I am really worried about that. You know, we filed, several of the legislators filed in the with FERC in response to the PJM filing. We raised this concern among many others at the time, and I continue to be concerned about that. So that's my primary question. I do have questions that you could either address now, or I could follow up with you on, or there may be potentially PJM may want to speak to what the possible outcomes are of the decisions that end up getting made related to the energy and ancillary markets and pricing reserves, how that could affect, like what could be the impact of that set of decisions that are still pending with FERC. So if you want to speak to that second one as well, I'd be interested in your thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you. So I heard most of the first question. So I think you're asking about the footnote having to do with the SOS, and if our program is similar to the one as New Jersey. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and we haven't looked into the details of New Jersey, but from what we hear speaking with their staff, it sounds like there are similarities. I don't know how the FAQ that's in the footnote got in the record. If we're going to look at the legalities of all that, I think maybe Miles can comment on that. But I think they make it clear in the footnote of what they believe the purpose of the default service provider program is for, and I think it's very clear that that's not the purpose of our program. The requirement to meet an RPS standard in the default service is no different than our competitive suppliers requirements.
Maybe my follow-up question then is, where are you in your process of, as we're trying to figure out if we need to take legislative action to protect consumers in Maryland, to protect the structures that are in place to protect consumers, as well as to protect our clean energy assets. It would be helpful to know, like, is the PSC still in some analysis point trying to figure this out? Are there other pieces of information we might gather? Is there additional information from PJM? How would we find out if it turns out, I mean, what would the sort of mechanics of the finding out that we were wrong and our SOS is covered by it? Would that require that somebody file with FERC against our SOS? Or like, how would we find out? And is there additional information that we can gather as we're trying to figure out how to protect, our state's ability to manage our energy markets?
Sure, and I think there are a lot of folks just starting to look at this, and I think they're reading it different ways. It's important for PJM also to be involved in the conversations, because I think part of the tariff requires that PJM and the market monitor make the call, make the determination. So we're going to be working very closely with them and with other states. We're not the only state that has an SOS type program, so I think this affects everyone, and we certainly intend to speak with other states.
Yeah, this is Miles. I think certainly Delegate Charkoudian, that PJM would definitely be, a first go at this. they have a compliance file to make in 30 days after the October 15th order. We anticipate working with them to on this question. The primary determination was that that many of these programs would not be subject to the MOPR. We hope that we will be able to ensure that is the case. Either a clarification or we hear from FERC to make sure that we have a clear termination. But internally, we're certainly doing it, and we'll look at it with PJM.
Okay, any other questions from any of the legislators? Again, we've got a small group here, so you can just raise your hand or just unmute yourself if you got a question. And that is directed at Delegate Brooks and Senators Hershey, Augustine, and Jennings on the phone. Anybody before we move to the next panel? Okay, seeing none.
I did.
Okay, Delegate Brooks. I'm sorry, Delegate Brooks.
This can go to anybody. I just want to know, give an idea, what kind of impact on MOPR, of the MOPR, would this have on the capacity market as is?
Morris, are you still with us?
Yes, everything froze for a second, and I could see Senator Feldman, and now I see you. Okay, I'm sorry. Was there a question that was asked, and if so, could you repeat it?
Yeah, Delegate Brooks had a question. Ben, why don't you shoot it?
Yes, I'll repeat that. What kind of, what kind of impact on the MOPR will this have on the capacity market as is?
Okay, I think you're asking what is the impact of MOPR on the capacity market?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So at the moment, we don't have that specific information. We do know that there is the possibility that if MOPR is employed, that certain resources would need to bid above a certain threshold. That would mean that they to support those resources outside the PJM market, we're essentially paying for capacity in the PJM market and paying for those resources outside the market as well. The resources that we as a state so far care about are the renewable energy resources, and many of them are intermittent. In the past, our RPS requirement was quite low, but also the amount of resources that participated, the amount of intermittent resources that participate in the capacity market were also quite low, below 2%. And the reason could be that these resources are expected to be available on, and I think Miles may have mentioned this, on those extreme days where PJM needs to call on as many resources as possible to meet the reliability of the system. And if these resources are truly intermittent, they may not be able to show up when necessary. And if they can't, then they're subject to severe penalties. So some of these resources do bid into the market, but from what we saw in the last auction, compared to the total portfolio of capacity in the market that had cleared the market, renewable resources were quite low.
Yeah, follow up, but doesn't the PJM already accounts for that in the reserve market? I mean, isn't that the purpose of the reserve market?
If we were to sponsor, subsidize, or provide payments to certain resources outside the PJM market,
Delegate, I think the
PJM would not count those resources.
Response to your question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Lisa, we have finished up, used up enough of the committee's time.
Okay, all right.
Well, this may be a conversation, Delegate Brooks, you know, because we have PJM coming up next. Maybe this would be potentially, you know, the PSC folks aren't that hard to reach, maybe offline, you know, some follow up with Morris and, okay, is that fair?
We can, Delegate Brooks and anyone else, we can certainly make the team available for a side conversation, meeting, or discussion. Happy to answer any of those questions.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, Lisa.
okay, great. Okay, we're going to go to the next panel from PJM. I've got Asim, I see you there from PJM, Tim Burtis, Stu, I never know, is it Whittam or Whittam? But Stewart's here. I think Stewart's here. And I'm, Asim, who was going to take the lead between the three of you from PJM as far as the slide deck?
Senator Feldman, that'll be me.
Okay, it's all yours. Floor's yours.
Very good. And just because of some of the technical difficulties, I just want to get a sound check to make sure that folks can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
You're good.
Great. Very good. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm going to take my full complement of time. My goal is to give Lael Campbell from Exelon as little time as possible. I've known Lael a really long time. We actually play in the same fantasy football league together. Historically, he does beat me in this league. It's very upsetting to me. So I am going to try and take his time away from him if possible. But thank you again, Senator Feldman, delegates, Charkoudian, Brooks. I think I heard Jennings on the phone as well. And if I've missed somebody, my apologies. My name is Asim Haq. I am the Vice President of State and Member Services for PJM Interconnection. I do have backup with me today, come with a full complement. Tim Burtis heads up our State Policy Solutions Group, which is a new group that I started actually at PJM. So he's here with us, as well as Stu Whittam, who manages all of our regulatory and legislative affairs for the great state of Maryland. So I'm going to present effectively what I presented at the Maryland Clean Energy Center engagement. However, please, this is a small group, this is an intimate group. Please feel free to stop me if you've got any questions, and we will get into some of the questions that have already been asked about standard offer service specifically, and maybe some other nuggets associated with the FERC order on compliance that was actually dropped this past Thursday. So if we could go to our first substantive slide. So PJM has a long-standing relationship that it enjoys with the great state of Maryland. In the 1920s, the founding members of PJM established the first power pool in the nation. They connected their high voltage transmission system to the Conowingo Hydroelectric Generating Station on the Susquehanna River in Maryland. That continues to contribute to the region's power supply today. Then in 1956, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company joined the power pool. So the M in our name actually stands for Maryland, and I'm very happy to represent this ongoing relationship here today. So let me emphasize, at the outset that PJM is here to serve as an independent source of information about the grid and markets. PJM is an organization that has purely voluntary membership, and it's governed by an independent board of managers. I want to note that we're profit neutral. We do not have any financial incentive to do anything other than to fulfill our mission, which our primary mission is to keep the lights on. So again, PJM is here to be a source of information, neutral arbiter and policy discussions that are occurring in PJM. Our subject matter experts, folks like Tim, are exceptionally valuable resources, and they have been and will continue to be available as Maryland policymakers chart a course for the future. But let's turn to the subject matter. So the capacity market and what is now being called the FERC MOPR order have been the subject of a lot of discussion in our footprint. I'm here to give you sort of the PJM explanation of some of these concepts. It was really interesting to hear the wonderful Maryland PSC sort of describe some of these concepts, and we'll do the same, but provide sort of the PJM lens to some of these concepts. So the capacity market. Look, I know that you have had discussions about these concepts before. this will be a refresher for folks. I know it's been a while since this group has met, but the capacity market operates to ensure that there are enough resources available to provide consumers with electric service around the clock. That's why the capacity market is associated with the concept in our industry called resource adequacy. The capacity market is run once per year via an annual auction and acts to ensure that there's enough power that we have a resource adequacy 3 years into the future. So obviously we have been waiting to run this auction and we haven't run one in a while, but let's take a very, very clean example. When PJM runs a capacity market in mid-2025, it will be providing revenue to winning resources 3 years from roughly that date in 2028. PJM has successfully operated a capacity market since 2007. It was established to address scarce investment in power generation at that time. In the mid-2000s, there was not enough of an incentive or perhaps too much risk for developers and operators to invest in new power plants or on maintenance in existing plants. The situation was forecast to cause reliability problems on the grid, but because the capacity market approved by the FERC attracted new investment into the sector, it mitigated the risks, alleviated the forecasted reliability violations, and increased the resources available to serve the grid. So just a few more nuggets about the capacity market. And the goal here is resource adequacy. We have enough power in the PJM footprint to serve the 65 million consumers and associated businesses in the footprint, and we have a healthy reserve margin as well. That puts PJM in a position where, as we sit here today, we don't necessarily have California's problems of having to interrupt service to consumers because of scarce resources, but at the same time, we have heard criticism that we have too much power in reserve, something that we continue to ponder and have conversations about internally. Just one more thing, let's be clear about something. Generating resources want to receive a capacity payment. There aren't many generators out there saying, please don't pay us. Generators want to receive a capacity payment. But the market, the capacity market, is a single clearing price market as it exists today, where generally speaking, a megawatt equals a megawatt equals a megawatt, whether that power comes from a nuclear resource, a renewable resource, a natural gas resource, a coal resource, and even demand-side resources like energy efficiency and demand response. And as in any competitive market, there will be folks who get a payment and folks who don't, or folks who are getting a payment, but perhaps it's not enough because the price set by the market isn't high enough for those resources to meet their costs. Let's go to the next slide, please. But just to show you here, capacity is just one revenue stream for generators. The bulk of their revenue, we've got real-time day-ahead and longer-term markets. The bulk of their revenue on average is actually derived from the energy market. So PJM has day-ahead and real-time energy markets. Go to the next slide, please. And what you'll see here is that the energy market is overwhelmingly the largest source of revenue for generators on the system. Just one more piece about the capacity market. It's also meant to really try and enable an orderly transition to newer, more efficient resources in the market, which it has. That transition has yielded a significant reduction in emissions. Between 05 and 19, for example, the carbon dioxide emission rate in Maryland fell by 45%. Let me emphasize that this clean energy transition continues today as technology advances, though, and costs continue to come down and newer resources become increasingly competitive. We expect continued growth in clean energy sources such as solar, wind, and storage resources. I actually saw an amazing stat that in our last interconnection queue, in our last queue window that closed, 88% of the projects in PJM's queue are actually some combination of wind, solar, and storage. So the system is consistently in transition. We've seen that transition certainly from natural gas basically replacing coal. Now what we're seeing is unequivocally, as costs continue to come down, the integration of what will undoubtedly be a much cleaner system with wind, solar, and storage. At FERC's direction, PJM has a plan to allow storage to access the wholesale markets. And actually, FERC just recently adopted a new measure to allow distributed energy resources to access the markets via a concept called aggregation. Let's move our attention to the FERC order. The next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to hit this slide a little earlier. This shows the reduction in emissions that we've seen from '05 to now. Again, if you just look at our interconnection queue, this is something that will continue certainly as time progresses. Next slide, please. Okay, so you've gone through the history of the minimum offer price rule. I'm not going to revisit that history. I thought that the team from the Maryland PSC did an absolutely wonderful job in sort of recalling the history. And so, Representative Brooks, I think you asked, what is the impact of the MOPR to the capacity market? And I think that at least what PJM has said is that because of a combination of things, and we can get into that combination of things, but it really consists of what the actual MOPR floor price will be for existing units in tandem with the exemptions to the MOPR that the FERC has granted. PJM, the Independent Market Monitor, Wall Street has said that in the near term, the MOPR will not result in tremendous impact to the the systems, state policy initiatives, et cetera. But in the long term, PJM itself has said that the MOPR does not likely create a long-term durable solution. And in fact, we started talking about what the next iteration of this market could potentially be. We had a general session that actually featured Governor J.B. Pritzker from Illinois. This was a matter of weeks ago, as well as representatives from sort of the various sector pockets at PJM, where we had a conversation about, hey, PJM itself is saying that this construct will not be durable in the long term. Let's start having a conversation about what a durable construct could look like. Obviously, PJM's in a really interesting position here because we're really delayed on running this auction. And so on one hand, we are looking to run an auction as soon as we get an order on, as Morris mentioned, the energy and ancillary services offset matter from the FERC. But at the same time, certainly you've heard from PJM's new management the desire to start thinking about a longer term solution to this, and also an acknowledgement that the social and otherwise objectives of climate policy are something that we absolutely have to consider. And this change is happening now. Again, when 88% of the interconnection queue is solar, wind, and storage, certainly something that we as a community have to think about, have to tackle. Let me just get to a couple nuggets about the FERC order, and then I think probably what we can do is just, I can answer a couple questions, and I was kidding about not giving Lael his time. He's then I think up after me and can have the time that he needed. So, okay, so a couple pieces about the FERC order on compliance. So one thing to understand is that PJM, when it tried to consider what compliance would look like with the MOPR order and the rehearing order from the FERC, we conducted a number of listening sessions for our stakeholders in our states to provide us input on what should go in that compliance, in our compliance filing. I think the number of stakeholder meetings we had was upwards near 9 collective stakeholder meetings. Certainly a number of discussions with the organization of PJM states body, as well as with the Maryland PSC. Morris knows how to get hold of all of us, as well as the chairman. And so we had a number of conversations. The FERC adopted much of what was in our compliance filings. Let's address the SOS issue first. So based upon a preliminary review, we believe that all of the states in our footprint that have default service procurement auctions will be able to navigate the FERC's order on compliance. That's a preliminary review. It's the hottest topic on compliance. We feel good about where those states are situated. The compliance language that PJM submitted to the FERC was language that was had broad consensus amongst all of our states that had default service auctions, as well as all of our members. In fact, to my best recollection, the only entity that submitted a, hey, we're not sure about this language or don't like this language necessarily was the market monitor, actually. I think Lael's on the line. Exelon actually supported our compliance filing language for the SOS as well. And the FERC adopted that language. We've got some more analysis to do. Certainly there's that footnote 134. The last sentence of that footnote 134 uses words like may and appears. And so the one way to view this, and it's not the sort of official PJM position because this just came out on Thursday and we're still kind of tackling everything associated with this order, including the compliance language associated with default service procurement, is that it's a cautionary tale by the FERC. So, hey, we're going to adopt PJM's compliance language. The states all supported this language. However, if you do plan on utilizing default service auctions to advance your state policy endeavors, be cautious. We're watching, why New Jersey in particular, why going to find an FAQ on their website in particular, not entirely sure. But if you look at the language, just the verbiage in footnote 134, you will see that the FERC not only says, hey, we're not making any adjudications associated with New Jersey's default service auction and by proxy anybody's default service auction, but also we'll use language like may and appears. How this is going to work, frankly, is with that compliance language having been accepted by the FERC, it now lands on the plate of both PJM and the IMM to determine whether or not these default service auctions are auctions that would be subject to the MOPR. Again, as we sit here right now, based upon our preliminary review and our understanding of how all these default service auctions work, because we have been communicating with the states and the respective commissions about how these default service auctions work, we believe that, again, that states will be able to navigate the FERC order on the SOS auction for Maryland in particular. But more to come there. We have not taken an official position on this because we want to be very, very thorough on this. Next up, with respect to auction timing, we still don't have an auction date. We need, as Morris mentioned, another order from FERC related to energy market reform, specifically this concept of the energy and ancillary services offset, and that interplay between the energy and capacity market. So that decision could have an impact on a couple of factors that are important to MOPR calculations, which is concepts called net ACR and net cone. So there could be an impact based upon how that is adjudicated on what the actual MOPR price floors will be for existing and new assets. So we do not have a date set yet. We do hope to start some pre-auction work in preparation for when the clock starts. Again, PJM in this position where it understands it's very behind in running auctions, while at the same time recognizing that the MOPR construct does not likely present a long-term durable solution. And we are more than willing to have conversations about what that could possibly look like for Maryland and all of our states. I'm going to stop there. Said a lot about the capacity market the MOPR decision specifically from this past Thursday and open things up to any questions. And Mr. Burtis is on the line as well, and we can do our best to try and be responsive to your inquiries.
Okay, well, let me just say, Chair Davis has joined us, and so maybe, Mr. Chairman, why don't I this would be a good time, maybe I'll hand the gavel back to you. And, we only have a few legislators on the line. We've got Delegate Brooks and Delegate Charkoudian and a few senators. So, but you came at the perfect time. You got the gavel back, my friend. You could
I was
acknowledge.
doing fine, Senator Feldman. I like to watch, so I was good. But I'm sorry I'm late. I was mixing my regular job with this job, and that other job won out. But I'm here now. It's good to be here with you all, and I'm glad we're certainly off to a good start. But I don't want to slow us down. I don't know if we're taking questions, Senator Feldman, how you set it up, but if we are taking questions as each presenter go, I guess this would be the appropriate time. If not,
yeah, we're just taking questions after each panel. And again, we've only got legislators. So either, folks have been just raising their hand. I think Senator Augustine had a question, but I'll turn it over back to you. But Senator Augustine, why don't you just go and ask your question?
Yes, please, Senator Augustine.
All right, thank you. Just for my education, remember, just from a timing standpoint, I know we talk about how these auctions are the next auction will deal with many years out. Where are we in that cycle right now where we do get to the point where there isn't any more sort of time?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Senator. So the next auction to be run, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but the next auction to be run is actually our 2019 auction, okay? And that will be for the delivery year 2022 and 2023. The delivery year actually spans sort of, we'll just call it for half of one year into half of the other. When do we get caught up? It's really hard to be able to tell that without knowing when the clock is going to start on this first auction. But what we've roughly said is that in between auctions, we'll need anywhere from, Tim, 4.5 to 6.5 months lead time is what we've said. And so, when exactly that would occur, not entirely clear because we don't know when the clock is going to start, but that's the amount of time that we would need in between each one of these auctions in order to get caught up. And obviously, as we sit here, it's, October of 2020. So we'll have, a 19 auction to run, 20 auction to run, and a lead in to get into a 21 auction. Tim, anything that you want to amend from what I said?
No, nothing to amend at all. Awesome. Just to reiterate the point or make it more apparent is just, so June 1, 2022 through May 31st of 2023 is the next auction that we have not yet, is the delivery year that we have not yet committed capacity for. And so waiting on that FERC order, we have up until now, until say April of 2022 to run that auction for that delivery year. But obviously, as each day does go by, we're already inside of our 3-year window of when we otherwise would have liked to have run it, as Austin pointed out, 2019. So it is getting close. We're not quite at a year yet, though.
Okay, so just so that I understand, you need basically 3 months though from the time of acceptance of that auction, basically till it's being implemented. So there is still some time for that right now.
Senator, but when we get this energy and ancillary services offset order, so we got one more outstanding order. Well, order and compliance, Tim, for this as well? Do we have to wait on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really primarily the ORDC order, Awesome, but yes,
Okay.
it is both, and then
Yeah, so our understanding from the FERC order is that we have to wait on this one energy and ancillary services offset order in order to start the clock. Okay, and so once we start the clock, you're looking at about a 6.5 month lead in until for us to do our pre-auction activities until we can run the next capacity auction effectively. And that will be for the 22-23 delivery year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Delegate Charkoudian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Awesome, great to see you. Welcome to the Maryland General Assembly.
Thank you, Delegate. I appreciate it.
And we still are going to, from the other day, I'm going to hold you to, we're going to have coffee and discuss demand curves.
I'm happy to do it.
Why fixed and variable demand curves will result in more or less capacity, but that's not what I'm going to ask you about right now.
All right.
Except we need to be on record committing to that. That's
understood. Understood.
I actually wanted to ask you about two things. One, just on the technical piece, this question about the energy and ancillary markets. And I guess the question is, can you talk about how that might affect? So we have the PJM filing that sets the net cone and net ACR for all the various resources, assuming they can prove the 35-year lifespan. What is it in the technical decision that's getting made about energy and ancillary services that would affect that? And so is it possible that we'll end up with a different floor that maybe these resources that have kind of found the way to make things work within the MOPR floors that you've set maybe won't be able to do that? I've been trying to understand what exactly those outcomes could be and how they might affect the planning that the current resources are doing with what you have.
Yeah, good. Tim, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely awesome. And good afternoon, Delegate Charkoudian. Thanks for the question. So so stepping back, just the upshot to your question is effectively that it could impact the MOPR price and what the resources get set at. We do not believe, based on what we filed, there would be a marketable difference from what we described back in the winter when we came in to speak to the General Assembly with what the MOPR floor values were. So existing single unit nuke do have a MOPR price that looks like it could be on the margin as to being able to clear. Otherwise, existing resources look like they would get a MOPR value that would at least be competitive and clear based on historic clearing prices. When we look at new resources, and new resources tend to have a higher MOPR because they need more revenue to come out just and capture their investment costs. We have looked at it, and even based with this new ENAS offset, which I'll explain why it's new in a second, that the FERC directed us to do, the tracking solar looks like it is still on the margin to be competitive from place to place. Again, this is a default MOPR, so it doesn't impact an ability for a particular resource to say, look, I have a different financing model, or I have something different than the average bearer that you guys used for your default calculation. So that option is still available on a unit specific basis. So I think the default value for tracking solar is about $213. Combined cycle is about $115. Combustion turbines $226, and then brand new coal, brand new nuclear, brand new other types of resource, offshore wind, are at a higher MOPR value that looks like it would be outside of the value of where the capacity market has historically cleared. Just to answer as to why there's a new value. So as part of the energy price filing that we had put into place, we historically would use projections of historic revenue from resources in setting the MOPR value or setting the new resource entry, right? We would use the last 3 years of a rolling average or so. Okay. And the FERC said, just to capture that, we want you to use a forward-looking energy and ancillary service projection. And in doing that, we have new energy curves. The future market and the energy is different. So that's why to take that revenue out, it adjusts.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And I think my last question is just, Asim, in talking about the neutrality of PJM and the fact that I think there is an overall understanding at PJM about the problems with the MOPR and frankly, the problems with an ability to accommodate and engage with states on their climate policies generally. And I would add to that, not just climate policies, but also ratepayer protection policies. And that's something we haven't talked as much about. Something I'm very concerned about, the ratepayer issues. And I know we're about to hear from the Office of People's Counsel on that. But I would just say, I do think, and I've talked to Stu a little bit about this, and I still am trying to understand all the decision points. And it's my understanding that really a lot of the decision making that gets made in the various, if you sort of calculate the level of influence that different stakeholders have, the companies involved, and specifically generators and fossil fuel generators, still really hold sway and influence significantly the policy making at PJM. And so I just think that's a reality that that just needs to be sort of out there. And, you know, it may be a little bit beyond this conversation, except to say if part of what you're saying to us as policymakers is you're interested in engaging with states and supporting their climate and hopefully ratepayer protection policies as well, we need to be clear about where the actual levers of power are within PJM, and also discuss that piece of it, and opportunities for real different voices, and frankly, voices beyond the ones that put us in the mess to begin with by filing with FERC, which is the majority of the PJM providers. So I don't know if you want to speak to that now or not. I still would welcome a chance.
Yeah.
Good organization chart. But.
Absolutely. I'm happy to engage in that discussion. It's probably a longer conversation to have. Part of my duties outside of overseeing state policy is also overseeing the member side of everything we do at PJM. And within the PJM stakeholder process, I'll just give you this as an example. We have 5 different sectors, okay? And at our most senior committees, all 5 of these sectors, they all have equal footing, okay? But let me just say this as an example. I would say that I probably have upwards from 10 to 20 member calls a week. And in each one of these calls, one of these sectors will say that another sector has far too much influence over decision-making at PJM. And so I think it very much depends on sort of your lens. I think what would be helpful is at some point we can sort of go through how the stakeholder process is structured, how the concept of sector-weighted voting works, where, for instance, Mr. Fields and his CAPS organization sit within the stakeholder process and those individual sectors, just to give you a lens there of how it all works. I often joke that the stakeholders that we see in PJM, when I was at the Ohio Commission, same spectrum of stakeholders, just multiplied by an exponent of 10. So the sectors are very diverse. The parties are very diverse. There are 1,000+ members. And it is certainly, when you have that kind of diversity, it's difficult for any system to be perfect, but definitely a conversation worth having just to kind of gain sort of that insight into how PJM decisions advance through that process.
We'll follow up with you and maybe invite other legislators that might be interested in that piece of it. Thank you.
Sounds great. Happy to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question, knowing that the capacity market provides long-term reliability by securing enough power to meet like a 3 years in the future, it also provides incentive that stimulates investments, you know, based on the existing generation. Now, those resources, if they are not, say, utilized, those capacity funds are still paid to those particular potential generators?
Yes, so if you clear a capacity auction, you will receive a payment for capacity every day of that delivery year. And so even if you're not dispatched in the energy market, you will still receive a capacity payment. And that's how the rubric works. You're effectively being paid to make sure you're available.
Right, okay, that's to show, okay. And on one other question, Asim, on your 4th slide, you show the wholesale cost and of 48.98, and then I did some quick percentages, and so the capacity cost there like 22.56%, and then the actual energy cost was 55.43%. So the capacity cost is about, well, we'd say maybe pretty close to about, well, 20-25% of the total cost of the kilowatt.
Yeah, that's effectively, we always use a sort of a rule of thumb of money that is flowing or revenue that is flowing to a generator. Just sort of a rule of thumb is we say roughly 20% of it will be capacity.
I see. Yeah. Okay. And with the current with this MOPR with what's going on right now, I would think that clearing price is going to go up, and what that means that the cost of the prices overall, I guess that's going to elevate as well.
Yeah, and Tim, I don't know if you want to speak to this. In all honesty, you look at, PJM has itself not conducted a forecast of what we expect to happen with the with MOPR pricing just yet. There are variables that we were waiting for on compliance. There's the ENAS offset as well, which we already discussed with Delegate Charkoudian. It's basically the MOPR floor price will be cone or ACR minus the ENAS offset. So it's very difficult to do these forecasts without some of the information that we've been waiting for. Delegate Brooks, I honestly can't tell you for certain whether or not prices are going to increase or decrease with the next capacity auction. I think that we just have to play sort of a wait and see game. And I think that, this is sort of the challenge in thinking about from a policy perspective, what do we do next? Because we really can't say with certainty what is actually going to happen with the next capacity auction clearing price. Tim, I don't know if you have any more color you would like to add to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that also. And I appreciate the question, Delegate Brooks. I mean, the only thing I would offer is this goes back to the short-term, long-term impact that Awesome had raised sort of before. And when we look at what is MOPRable on the short-term impact, and then what is it that actually would have a consequential MOPR that if it was the last resource in the stack or it got pushed out of being able to clear, that would be what results in a higher price because something else higher has to come in, or a resource that would have been in lower ends up coming in at a higher price. There's not a lot of megawatts there that we're talking about for the initial term that are either going to get MOPR'd or have a consequential MOPR. I don't want to be so definitive because that's just an anecdotal assessment from me right now. But again, that's the short-term, long-term impact. If I'm looking around for where are the resources that could really shift the curve as a consequence of this policy, I'm not seeing a big shift in the near term here.
And one last question. I know back when Calpine filed that complaint with FERC back in 2016, the concern was that the prices were being artificially suppressed by out of market payments. Now federally subsidized generators, would that apply to them as well? Because it seems like this MOPR deals primarily with state subsidized payments. What about federal subsidized payments?
Yeah, certainly a pain point. The decision from the FERC is that a federal subsidy is not a subsidy that would be a MOPRable offense. We'll call it that. So only state subsidies are subject to the MOPR. And there's some theory surrounding why that's the case, but that's how the FERC ruled.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? I can't see, so you guys are going to have to jump in and sort of let me know if you do have questions. I can only see the folks who are showing on the screen if they have questions. If there aren't any additional questions, I think Mr. Campbell from Exelon, Lael Campbell, is up next.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, great. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up?
Yes, sir.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Awesome, for your promise not to filibuster, even though you went ahead and filibustered anyway. If we can get the slide deck up, I think OPC was next on the agenda, but I do appreciate the opportunity to go now, and I will go quickly in light of the time, and I appreciate everybody else who's hanging around here. Lael Campbell, Vice President of State Government Affairs for Exelon, primarily, well, represent the generation side of the business. So our Exelon Generation Company and our Constellation businesses. If you can go to the next slide. This is just a general overview of our contribution to clean energy in the country. We're by far the largest supplier of zero carbon emission electric generation in the US. One of every 9 zero carbon emission megawatts that goes onto the grid in the US comes from the Exelon generation fleet. And we are also, by a magnitude of 4, the lowest emitting generation fleet in the country. So next slide. This is just a snapshot of our contribution to Maryland. Obviously, on the right side, we've got the utility companies. Again, my team and myself, we represent the 2 columns on the left. That's the Exelon generation business and Constellation retail business. Constellation serving over 2 million customers, headquartered in Baltimore. And Exelon generation, part of that zero carbon emissions footprint is right here in Maryland, a big part of it. The Conowingo Dam is the largest renewable resource in Maryland, and the Calvert Cliffs nuclear plant is the largest and most abundant zero carbon emissions resource in the state. Between the two, Conowingo and Calvert supply 95% of the zero carbon emissions generation generated inside of Maryland. Calvert Cliffs alone avoids more than 10 million tons per year of CO2. That would be the equivalent of taking 2 million cars off the road, and that would also be the equivalent of all the registered vehicles in Maryland. So significant contribution to Maryland's greenhouse gas reduction and climate goals. Altogether, all of our resources, including wind and solar, represent over 2,300 megawatts of capacity. That's enough capacity to serve 2.2 million homes in the state with zero carbon emissions generation. So if you go to the next slide, I thought Asim Haq did a good job of kind of breaking down the energy versus the capacity market, which is what this slide does. But I thought I'd just take a moment here to talk about PJM and sort of get us to where we're at with the MOPR and the options for the state, because we believe that the PJM markets, although they provide tremendous value, do have a flaw in that they fail to recognize or value the environmental attributes of generation. They are designed to recognize the least cost energy source without recognizing the environmental value of that resource. So in our view, this essentially amounts to a subsidy for fossil generators, because fossil generators do not have to pay for or be accountable for the cost of their pollution. And because environmental attributes are ignored in these markets, and and environmental attributes are ignored, clean generators look artificially more expensive than they really are, and they look less competitive. So this puts tremendous economic pressure on the region's most reliable and abundant sources of zero carbon generation, like a Calvert Cliff. So in response to this, states, in response to the market, the wholesale market not internalizing environmental policy, states like Maryland have taken matters into their own hands with aggressive clean energy programs like CEJA and the RPS that are designed to expand and preserve clean zero emission generation. And although we believe that these state programs like CEJA, like RPS, are a proper counterbalance to a regional electricity market that ignores environmental attributes, the PJM market monitor and fossil generators have taken a different view. And instead, they've argued to FERC that state clean energy programs undermine competition by lowering prices in the wholesale market, which gets us to where we are. Last week, as has been indicated in other presentations, FERC agreed with PJM and the fossil supporters and approved the new minimum offer price rule that essentially is going to some degree, force state-supported clean energy resources out of the PJM capacity market. The MOPR is going to mandate that state-supported clean generators cannot offer into the PJM capacity market below a certain amount. And this is going to artificially price certain renewable generators out of the market. And those clean generators that are being priced out of the market are going to be replaced with emitting generation selected by PJM instead. So in other words, capacity market revenues that could or would otherwise go to state preferred clean energy resources are now going to go to fossil units. So the result is higher cost for a dirtier energy portfolio. This, in our view, is a bad policy outcome for Maryland and other states that are struggling with this. So in essence, the result is we're at a key transition point here where we're looking at a market that has historically simply ignored the environmental attribute of state-supported clean generation to a market that is now outright attacking state clean energy programs. So we're at a key crossroad, and that's why we appreciate being able to have this discussion to take a look at, the impact to Maryland as well as potential solutions. If you go to the next slide. This is just real quick here. Awesome showed a similar slide on the top left to showing PJM's emissions reductions over the past decade or so. It's been great progress, very proud of that, and they've done a great job. But when you look to the right, you see, that's only the tip of the iceberg. And we have a long way to go in the region to meet the carbon and emissions reduction goals that we need to address the climate issue. And that's why I think the MOPR puts us at a real critical juncture, because I think the MOPR is a policy that actually forces things to start heading in the other direction here, to not even get to the red, to get further away from the red. Just by way of example, on the left side there, it talks about, if some of these nuclear plants that have already announced retirements end up retiring within the PJM footprint, you're going to see significant carbon increases within PJM, not decreases. Again, Calvert Cliffs alone, just by way of example, 10 million tons of avoided carbon per year, equivalent of taking 2 million cars off the road. Next slide. So here I just want to kind of visualize the MOPR a little bit and how it works. As I had indicated, the MOPR is going to require that state-supported resources can't offer in at a level below a certain level into the market. So at the bottom there, you see the green bars represent the default MOPR offer levels for certain resource types. Tracking solar and offshore wind in particular are good to note. That black line represents the historical PJM clearing prices. So as you can see, at the default level, these resources are either right at the margin or above it. I don't think anybody's arguing that offshore wind, Maryland has a significant offshore wind program with units scheduled to come online in that 24-25 timeframe. It's very important to note that timing there. But even other types of resources, this suggests that they're going to have trouble potentially being able to clear the capacity market, even at historic levels. Now, one thing to note, we've talked about a few kind of awkward pieces of the FERC order. We talked about the BGS footnote 134. There was another kind of awkward paragraph in the FERC order that talked about the way these levels will be set. So one thing that PJM has offered in their tariff is the ability for certain renewable resources to come in and request a unit-specific MOPR, a lower than these default floors based on unit-specific characteristics, including the ability to come in and show that they have a longer lifespan and they can kind of spread costs out over a longer lifespan and lower this floor. Which was a big win, but at the same time, there's language in the FERC order that sort of took that back a little bit by stating that in order to be able to show you have a longer lifespan and can get that lower floor, you have to support it with it has to be consistent with your financing documents. So that's another thing to flag, just in the lines of, you know, strange findings in the most recent FERC order. So let's go to the next slide. This slide is just, you know, just various statements from fossil generators and others that really talk about their real motives. I think this cuts to something that Delegate Charkoudian mentioned, as well as Delegate Brooks, that you know, they've been very clear in a lot of their filings that they want this MOPR because they want to be paid more for their emitting generation. And state environmental policies undermine that and result in emitting generators being paid less. So they are trying to reverse that, and the vehicle that's reversing that is indeed the MOPR. If you go to the next slide. This is a view of the MOPR impact to Maryland specifically, and we're using here solar as an example. If you go down to the graphs at the bottom, the blue bars kind of represent the increasing solar needs that Maryland has under its RPS that was implemented under CEJA. This is through 24-25, and as you can see, it's ramping up significantly. On the right orange bars, the dark orange bars represent solar that's either already been built or in the queue and has an interconnection that actually will not be subject to the MOPR, which is a good thing. But that is only about 235 megawatts. The light orange represents all the solar that is in the queue, scheduled to be built in Maryland, that is not going to be exempt from the MOPR. So this says that in order to, and that's about 835 megawatts. So for Maryland to get to its 24-25 goals with regard to solar, you know, we're talking about, you know, 835 megawatts, 80% of that solar is going to be subject to the MOPR. And to the extent those resources are not able to participate in the capacity market and are not able to get those capacity revenues, in order to justify them being built and coming online, they're going to have to find a way to make up those revenues from somewhere else, which I think gets to a good point that Delegate Brooks mentioned, that, you know, it's not only just about looking at how much is the MOPR going to increase the capacity market prices. It's also the other effect of, well, to the extent that resources that would otherwise want to participate in the capacity market and get that capacity revenue, how much are consumers going to have to pay more in RPS or other venues to make up for the lost revenues that these resources can't get in the capacity market? So if you go to the next slide, I think this hopefully is responsive to Delegate Brooks's question relating to, you know, estimates of the impact of the MOPR on capacity prices. This is a report that came out in May by Rob Gramlich from Grid Strategies, and he was, you know, not looking at that the issue that I just talked about with, you know, replacing the lost revenues. He was actually looking at, I think, what Delegate Brooks's question was earlier, with all these resources not being able to fully participate in the capacity market, what's the estimated increase in capacity prices for consumers? So he had two separate ranges here. One was very high. That's with a lot of nuclear resources not being able to clear. The lower end was where you still had nuclear resources in. But even on the lower end, he's showing close to $10 billion of additional cost over the next decade. So extrapolating that down to Maryland, you know, Maryland roughly represents about 10% of the PJM capacity market. So that's, you know, close to $1 billion of additional increased costs to Maryland on the low end of this estimate. So I think that's something to look very closely at. Excuse me. So if you go to the next slide, you know, what are the available solutions for Maryland? And frankly, right now there is one available solution, and that is for jurisdictions or states to adopt a fixed resource requirement. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about other solutions. Asim mentioned that the MOPR is not a sustainable policy. We completely agree with that. The question is, do states even want to sustain it even at all, even if it's for a few years? And the states really don't have a lot of choices, because these other policies that are being talked about, whether it's a clean energy, regional clean energy procurement market, or a regional carbon pricing market at the full cost of carbon, these things are going to take years to implement. So the only solution a state like Maryland has in the meantime is to essentially take matters into their own hands. Again, the MOPR impacts the capacity market only. As Delegate Brooks pointed out, that's roughly 20% of the overall market. And so just that 20%, the state would essentially take into its own hands and conduct its own procurement of capacity, and it would favor the resources that the state prefers, the clean energy resources. And essentially the state telling a jurisdiction within its territory to essentially procure its own capacity and focus on the state-supported resources. We think there's a number of different benefits to using FRR. We think it's an efficient way to achieve clean energy goals. Again, if clean and renewable resources are able to be ensured that they can receive a capacity revenue, well, that decreases their need to receive revenues from other places like RPS. So there's some benefits there and efficiencies there of using the capacity revenue stream to actually target the types of resources the state wants to have and wants to support, as we're addressing long-term climate goals here and clean energy goals. It prevents duplicate capacity purchases and unnecessary purchases of dirty capacity, one of the drawbacks of the MOPR that we talked about. An FRR can be structured in so many different ways and provides tremendous flexibility. There's so many different elements that could be added to it to provide consumer protections, to target the resources you want, whether that's demand response resources, storage resources, other clean energy resources, and do it in a way that incorporates consumer protections. There's just so many different ways that FRR could be structured to allow for that. The general rule is that another advantage is that under an FRR, you have to, an FRR is not required to procure as much capacity on a percentage basis as PJM more broadly has procured. So you can procure less to satisfy your reliability goals. And the last bullet here, I think, is an important one. There's a lot of flexibility in FRR, or FRR provides the flexibility to mitigate penalties that resources that are participating in the PJM market on their own are subject to. So if you're a resource, renewable resource, and you want to participate in the PJM capacity market, if you actually don't show up and deliver when called upon 3 years later, you could, in certain time periods, you could be subject to a penalty for non-performance. Under an FRR, there's something called it's a pooling option where the FRR entity can say, listen, I don't want each resource to be judged and penalized for performance. I want to be judged and penalized based on the performance of my entire portfolio. So this provides a lot of flexibility to a state like Maryland looking at an FRR, in that you could bring on more resources, like intermittent resources like demand response, solar, battery storage, because that penalty risk is lessened, especially if you have a very high capacity, very reliable, large clean energy resource like a nuclear generator as part of that portfolio. The chances are that portfolio as a whole is going to perform when it's needed to, and thereby shield and protect some of these other renewable resources. So this is another great advantage that actually allows the state to even further allow clean resources to participate in the capacity market, even beyond the levels they're participating today. So just next slide. Very important one. And this one, I think, goes to Senator Augustine's questions around timing. At the bottom here, we see a timeline, and you know, I know there's a sense of, well, you know, this is a long-term issue that, even the analysis from Gramlich that I showed before, you know, that $10 billion over 10 years, a lot of that is increasing as we get into the 10 years, right? So sooner, you know, in early years, maybe not as much of an impact in that first auction, but when you look at the schedule of the auctions versus, you know, the schedule for Maryland sessions, you realize that the long term is already here to some degree. In 2021, we're thinking, and again, the final schedule's not out, but if you look at the bottom graph here, in 2021, we're going to have auctions that go into 2023 and then ultimately into 2024. And likely in very early 2022, we're going to have capacity auctions that are making decisions that go into 2024, 2025, and then by the end of 2026. So because of the compressed schedule, decisions really need to be made now. Even if, say, nothing happened in 2021 legislatively, and we got into 2022, there's still probably not enough implementation time to do something before that 24-25 auction. So decisions that are going to be made now about what to do in 2021 are going to impact Maryland's clean energy policy into the middle of this decade. So I think there is some urgency here that I don't think should be ignored. Every year, PJM, or in the most recent auction, PJM as a whole spent roughly $9 billion on capacity. Again, 10% of that is, roughly 10% of that is Maryland's portion. So decisions are going to be made from Maryland amounting to $900 million of how those capacity dollars are going to be spent for Maryland. And Maryland's either going to, like, again, wait for the long term and let this policy kind of work in the short term. There's going to be some bad decisions, I think, being made that are going to favor fossil and harm clean, and in turn harm Maryland's goals. You can leave it here, or you know, the last thing I wanted to mention, it's on the next slide, is the question around, well, what does a change of administration mean? You know, is this a problem if Biden comes into office? And you know, we're still gaming this out a little bit internally, but I think a few things are readily apparent. You know, from consulting with our FERC team and others, is that you know, based on the current makeup of the FERC, they are going to have a Republican majority likely through the end of June in 2021. And so even if the one Republican whose term expires at the end of June 2021 leaves, FERC will still be left with a 2-2 split, therefore still unable to do anything with this policy unless and until you know, the Democratic majority is put in place, and that is, of course, assumes that you know, the FERC makeup is going to be a priority for the Biden administration. So best case scenario, we're looking at the middle of 2021 before FERC can even start to begin making changes. And then the question is, well, is FERC going to be looking to replace the current policy with a new and better policy? If the answer is yes to that, that is a multi-year, probably 3-4 year thing where you're going to be, again, stuck with the current policy as they're trying to replace it with something, you know, newer or better. The other option is, of course, that a majority Democrat FERC essentially tries to repeal the MOPR. But even in those kind of scenarios, playing them out, you know, through the administrative process at FERC, I think at a bare minimum, assuming everything goes well and is expedited, those policies wouldn't even be in effect until sometime in early 2022, in the best case scenario. More likely, those policies of just kind of repealing this thing go into 2022. So if you go back a slide to that timeline again, you know, even in a best case scenario with a Biden win and a Democratic FERC, again, we're still looking at probably auctions being run under this MOPR policy that impact, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent in Maryland on capacity heading into, I would say at a minimum, that 24-25 auction. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully the visual here gives people a sense of, you know, the long term is actually right now from a decision standpoint. And anyway, I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions. There's a few other slides in this deck, you know, with some additional information if folks are interested. And thank you again for the time.
Are there any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Leo, thanks for the presentation. Question, yeah, it seems like FRR is a viable option to avoid that MOPR, but aren't there some federally mandated reliability requirements that one has to satisfy for PJM? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so, and great question. So the FRR actually is a construct of PJM. Is a federally envisioned construct. So yes, part of the FRR is when the state or the jurisdiction says, I'm no longer going to buy my capacity from the PJM market. I'm going to instead supply my own capacity. They, in doing that, have to have they have to be consistent with the overall reliability metrics that PJM has for that specific region. So yes, great question. So any procurement that, well, you know, so then there's some choices that are associated with that, right? So which parts of Maryland would be the ones electing FRR? Is it the whole state? Is it just a subsection of the state? I mean, these are all decisions that have to be made, but there's different metrics you can look at because there are certain parts of Maryland that actually have more flexibility from the reliability requirement standpoint to procure from a broader range of resources throughout the region. So great question, but the bottom line of the answer is an FRR still would have to meet the federal standards for reliability, and the resources that would participate in the FRR also would have to be able to also qualify to participate in the PJM auction. So it's not like you can procure something that PJM couldn't procure.
Right, exactly. Yeah, okay. Thanks very much.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, Senator Hershey?
Yes, go ahead, Senator Hershey.
Thank you very much. Leo, thank you for your presentation. Just to follow up on that question, an FRR, in a sense, moves the capacity procurement from PJM to a utility. Isn't that right? A regulated utility would do the procurement rather than PJM?
That's right. The vehicle under the PJM tariff to do the FRR is one of the utilities in Maryland.
Okay. So where are the price protections for the consumers if the utilities are the one that are now in charge of procurement?
Yeah, no, it's a great question and a great concern, and certainly one we encourage Maryland to address. You know, the current PJM market has market power issues, right? And the current PJM market has certain controls to manage that. As I pointed out in my slide showing the benefits of an FRR, one of the great benefits is flexibility. It's flexibility for a state like Maryland to say, well, we're not going to pay for capacity beyond X price, or put in certain controls, you know, akin to the alternative compliance payment in RPS, or certain requirements that, you know, capacity procured under an FRR be reflective of, you know, historic capacity prices in PJM or in the region. I mean, there's a multitude of controls that could be put in place. It's not like, you know, anyone designing a procurement could run scot-free. We would expect, certainly expect, you know, the state as part of any a legislative initiative or otherwise to want to have and indeed have, any number of controls, or, to manage market power issues. Good question.
So in a sense, the state could also determine which generation assets can participate in the FRR, right?
Absolutely, that's another great benefit. Yep.
Again, if we're watching over costs with this, back to the ratepayers. Early in your presentation, you kind of interchanged clean energy and renewable energy a number of times. At this point in time, Maryland has not asked its ratepayers to subsidize clean energy, just renewable energy. So, we're looking still at solar, we're looking at wind, looking at hydro, and some of those. Nuclear is not in that equation yet. And you mentioned nuclear a number of times. Could a number of these things that you have a concern with be alleviated if Maryland were to add nuclear to its RPS?
Well, let me answer the first point about the presentation. So the MOPR policy is not only going after RPS programs like those in Maryland, but it's also going after the clean energy programs like they have in New Jersey and Illinois and elsewhere. So that's why the blending, right?
Okay.
But yeah, you are correct. As it would apply to Maryland, it's only going to essentially apply to the renewable piece. So the answer to your second question is if Maryland were to adopt some form of a ZEC, let's say if Calvert Cliffs was showed it was needed to make sure it doesn't retire. That ZEC would then be subject to a MOPR, right? So Maryland just adopting a ZEC doesn't actually help unless it's combined or complemented with some type of an FRR that in turn could protect that program along with the other RPS programs. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, part of the reason we've gotten here is that traditionally nuclear has been able to bid in the capacity market at zero, right? And over a number of years, that's what we've seen happen. Then Illinois comes around, you've got 2 facilities up there, you come in at a higher price, doesn't clear the market. And then that's what brought up a lot of this concern here. Why can't nuclear just bid in at zero and make sure it clears the market?
Well, I mean, those were decisions that were made in Illinois relating to, the needs for the long-term viability of those plants. So, I mean, the decision was made to offer in above zero because there was the thinking was what do these units need long-term to survive? So if you think offering in a zero is not going to result in enough revenues if you clear to meet your costs and stick around, then the alternative is to offer in at a different amount that is more reflective of what you are actually going to need to stay around.
Right. Okay. I know. I mean, I just know that traditionally you've been able to bid in at zero, and it just seems like a lot of why FERC is doing some of the things that they are doing is kind of the reaction that Illinois had. But I certainly, again, am supportive of places like Calvert Cliff that employ, numerous individuals to work and maintain the facility. I'm challenged to find out why it's so expensive for solar and wind to bid in. Well, we just have land-based wind. I don't know if we'll ever have offshore wind, but at least solar right now, we don't see the types of jobs created at least once the facility is up and running. So I've always been an advocate to say, where are the people that are out there working, and if any subsidies need to be provided, shouldn't we look at the facilities that are employing Marylanders rather than other places? So thank you very much. I appreciate your comments.
I appreciate that. Great question, Senator Hershey.
Delegate Jakudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did I raise my hand?
I thought I saw it. If I'm mistaken, forgive me.
Well, since I have the opportunity, let me ask 2 quick questions. I guess one of the questions, of course, Lael, that is out there is, as Exelon has really promoted the FRR approach, concerns about market power, but also concerns about if we moved in this direction, does that mean that Exelon will be seeking to get subsidies? Like, is there a value to Exelon? Do you believe in this FRR approach, even if there isn't an intention to have the next step be nuclear subsidies? Because I think there's folks who probably support the approach, but don't support the subsidies, but feel hesitant because it looks like maybe this is kind of a pathway in that direction. So I wonder if you want to speak to that point.
Yeah, I mean, we do believe that FRR is good policy for Maryland. We do believe that the MOPR is bad policy for Maryland. You know, as the owner of you know, the largest clean generation fleet in the country, and you know, we're obviously working in other states and jurisdictions on similar policies. We definitely support an FRR for Maryland, and you know, obviously, I think, you know, any type of clean energy procurement of capacity for Maryland, I think it would be almost silly for Maryland to not want to have its largest and most abundant source of clean energy to be a part of that. It would be our hope that Calvert Cliffs could be a part of that. But I think, you know, what's on the table right now is the FRR, and whether that's the right move for Maryland. You know, we've talked in other venues about, you know, Calvert Cliffs' economic struggles. But, you know, we to date have not, you know, sought anything specific in that regard. Right now, we are focused on the FRR.
Okay. And one last question that I'll mention now, and you can speak to briefly. There is, since the last legislative session, there's been the FERC decision 2222 that affects DERs and potentially allows DERs to be part of all of the capacity, ancillary, and energy markets in an aggregation form. And so theoretically, they could be part of a capacity market if they were aggregated, and they wouldn't, though, because they'd end up getting MOPR'd. I suspect they would sort of be shut out of the BRA. So in theory, then we could in Maryland, if we went forward with an FRR, bring the DERs in and direct more capacity payments in addition to other supports for rooftop solar, for example, could happen through this. Is that your understanding as well? Have you all looked at that in your analysis?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'd say at a high level, there's been some promising developments both at PJM and FERC around both the ability of distributed energy resources as well as storage to participate in the capacity market. And, you know, as I said to Delegate Brooks, you know, under the FRR rules, you know, what's good for the PJM capacity market also can work in an FRR. So yes, I think we're heading on a path where these resources are going to be able to actively qualify and participate and offer capacity, which definitely would open up opportunities for them under an FRR. And then back to the flexibility point that I made, FRR could be structured in a way that encourages even more of those types of resources to participate in a Maryland FRR than they otherwise would participate in the PJM capacity market. So I think a lot of additional opportunities for those type of resources there. And going back to the concept of, you know, the portfolio penalties and you know, having like a nuclear generator there, that actually provides even better incentive and protection for those types of, you know, more intermittent resources to maybe want to delve in and receive a capacity payment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So lots of opportunity.
All right. If there are no further questions, thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. I'd like to go to Mr. Fields, the People's Council. Mr. Fields, I inadvertently skipped over you. I thought I had called on you, but I had not. So accept my apologies and let's get it rolling.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly understand. Bill Fields, Deputy People's Council. I will just keep talking. If people can't hear me, I'm sure I'll get the sign to stop. I didn't want to inflict any additional slides on the committees after what they've already seen. And given the time, I'll hit a few highlights of what's been talked about. The Office of People's Council is a voting stakeholder at PJM. And we've been working on MOPR issues from even before this latest round in 2016. and have consistently been opposed to the concept and the proposals. We've also objected at FERC and litigated that issue at FERC, and we're one of the dozen or more parties that have appealed FERC orders on this issue. And it's noted that's all pending now before the Seventh Circuit. Since where we were back in last winter, I think as Asim mentioned from PJM, I think some of the concerns about significant near-term price impact from MOPR have been eased somewhat from the numbers that PJM has put out about what the actual MOPR floors will be, and also developments in terms of units being able to get that unit-specific exemption and demonstrate a lower level of costs. Now, it's not, there's certainly still questions about that. It's not known for sure how that's going to happen, but those are positive developments towards reducing the financial impact that this might have in the near term. I wanted to talk a little bit about the questions that were raised about PJM, the board, and the influence on PJM policies from different stakeholders in the process. It's one of the issues that my office and other advocate offices talk to PJM consistently about, and that's the independence of PJM. PJM is designed and set up to be independent from different stakeholder interests, but it's an ongoing concern with some of the policies that we've seen, including in PJM support for MOPR rules and positions. So that's something we talk about a good deal with the board. Another issue that we talk about with them on a consistent basis is requesting that PJM provide estimates and projections of what the costs of new initiatives will be. And that was talked about a little bit earlier today with trying to project what the impact of MOPR will be. You have multiple moving targets. The capacity market itself is a moving target. As just in some degree, well, it's an auction. To the extent it's competitive is a different question, but there are a lot of moving parts. Even trying to project what those costs will be without MOPR being layered on is a difficult task. And then trying to deal with what the impacts of MOPR would be on top of that is a very hard thing to project. But PJM is in the is in the best position to do some of that analysis and provide those cost projections. So I think the questions that were asked today about that to PJM are good questions, and questions that we ask, like I said, consistently, and I think all of us should continue to ask of them to look for projections of cost, because things have changed, like I said, since the winter and the spring, and we really, I think, all would be best served with the best possible projections of what those impacts could be. I also want to talk a little bit about the FRR option and some of the issues that were just raised about market power. I think that's a very significant concern. And to think about it, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the RPS works. The RPS is available to a wide range of suppliers to sell RECs. With SRECs, they have to be located in Maryland, but you still have a diversity of ownership of companies trying to develop plants. And so you have a large number of sellers trying to sell RECs and SRECs, and that creates a situation where to the extent that the developers, that the plant owners don't need that extra revenue from RECs, that's going to allow the price to come down. And we've seen that, happen over time. With setting up an FRR, we need to be very careful that we maintain that type of dynamic, because when you start to just setting up an FRR for, I'll say, economic purposes, not worrying about environmental concerns for the moment, but just on economic basis, there are limitations about buying from certain areas of the system for Maryland. And the issue with that is that targets the procurement to a limited number of resources with a limited number of owners in some circumstances. And that could leave you in a situation where your customers could be exposed to that market power. With the PJM market, as was mentioned, there are rules that limit what they can bid. There's a market monitor that reviews that process and those markets. None of that would apply to an FRR. PJM, the market monitor, FERC, they view FRR as a side transaction where the utility would be asking the market, how much would it cost to sell me certain capacity for a certain time frame? And if those entities that own that capacity decide to offer it to Maryland, to the local utility who's doing this at a very high price, that's between those two parties. And you need to maintain the ability, or you need to set up the FRR in a way that the procuring entity is able to say, no thanks, we're not going to buy that. The difficulty is that the FRR has a 5-year requirement. In other words, once you get into it, you're required to do it for 5 consecutive years. And now you don't have to buy the 5 years worth of capacity up front. You only have to buy 1 year. But what you need to be very careful about is that you don't get into it with 1 year of procurement and then the next 5 years prior to do FRR and to buy from a limited number of entities. You have to go back to them for year 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you subject yourself to what they may want to charge you for certain resources. So those are very significant concerns. I think those would have to be, if FRR is going to be given a serious consideration, those market power related issues and how you set it up need to be very closely considered. Bid sort of overall bid caps could provide some, for different types of resources, could provide some level of protection, but that approach might also, reduce some of the competitive nature of the procurement and lose some of the benefit that you get in, for example, in pursuing the environmental policy through a system that works more like the RPS. So I don't think those things. We haven't concluded that it's impossible to deal with those in a reasonable way, but we are definitely concerned that if the state goes down that road, that those issues need to be given really careful consideration to prevent unnecessary costs being imposed on customers for buying the capacity itself. And then also for how the environmental goals are being achieved. The state's environmental goals, are they being achieved in a way that's actually resulting where customers are paying money to actually result in a lowering of emissions? And one of the issues that the committees would have to deal with is, if we set up a system that's sending money to certain resources, RPS is designed to bring in resources that otherwise might not come onto the system and be used. And then the question has to be asked of FRR, is it it a mechanism that is going to result in some low emission, zero emission units, if that's what you're targeting to? Is it going to result in more of those units than otherwise would be on a system if you went ahead and set that up and paid that money? I think that's a question that would need to be asked and looked at carefully to be sure that customers weren't paying for something, for some types of resources that weren't going to be there anyway. I think those are the main points that I wanted to add on to the discussion. I thank the committee for putting us on the agenda and allowing me to make those points, and be happy to answer any questions delegates or senators have for some of the other issues that were talked about before that I skipped over. Thank you.
You're muted.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm sitting there like, why didn't anybody? Are there any questions?
I do have just a real quick one.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We've talked an awful lot about this. Are we the only ones in the country who were impacted by this rule, or were some of the other regional? I mean, is it just like, is this unique to us? That's just more of a general question I'm asking there.
The MOPR rule itself is a PJM rule, so it's restricted to this region. Other regions in the country have dealt with this issue and there's different approaches to it from different parts of the country. However, the sort of resource mix and the environmental policies of the states involved are really different from the Northeast to the Mid-Atlantic, and and then the West Coast is different also. So there are some some lessons maybe, or some information that could be gleaned from other regions, but the MOPR itself is PJM specific, so it's really specific to the 13 PJM states plus District of Columbia.
Okay, real quick, I'll just say it a different way a little bit. So no one else uses these types of subsidies into capacity markets across the country? State subsidies?
No, the other states, in New England have similar, for example, have similar RPS type requirements. Other state policies that could be considered, that are considered subsidies in FERC's view, and they're bid into capacity markets. But there's other provisions in those market arrangements that try to deal with that, similar to the way that MOPR is trying to deal with it in PJM.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
Senator Hershey.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Bill, I want to follow up on the questions that I asked earlier. If I recall, when we had a meeting in the Economic Matters room, we had talked about the FRR over there. And I remember a map being set up that was in different colors. And am I right in remembering that it required the utility to purchase generations from different percentages from different areas of that map? Do you recall that?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
But it depends on which, it's different for different areas of PJM. It's based on the transmission capability.
Right, but the issue, the example that was being brought up was basically BG&E taking over the central Maryland and doing an FRR there. Wouldn't that, in order for them to meet all of the capacity requirements, would that in a sense almost require them to purchase from Calvert Cliffs or not? Could they meet their goals without purchasing from Calvert Cliffs?
No, actually.
Could they meet the capacity?
If you're talking about strictly buying capacity, not layering on an environmental goal on top of that,
no,
then
just capacity.
Just capacity. Then no, I don't think it would, on that basis, BGE would have to buy from Calvert Cliffs. But either BGE and potentially PEPCO. It's less clear about PEPCO, but if you did it for BGE, they'd have to buy some of the megawatts from within the BGE zone. Calvert Cliffs is not in the BGE zone. It's not actually in the PEPCO zone either, which that's a, just a strange thing. But BGE is but they would have to buy from for the BGE zone, and you'd have to look, and you want to look at, well, how many different owners are there of generation of supply in the BGE zone, and that's just the economic or straight capacity part of it.
Right, but that's also to make sure that there is some competitiveness in the acquisition of that capacity and energy, right? Right,
and that issue is there with the PJM market as well. I mean, under the PJM market, you have to buy, when PJM clears the market, they make sure a certain amount comes from BGE, but there are controls on it that say all the units in BGE can only bid so much, and it's based on their costs. The state.
So that's my follow-up then. If PJM is out of this in an FRR, who makes up those controls? Is that the PSC makes those controls, or is this the legislature makes this controls when we decide to write a piece of legislation that would allow this?
The legislature can control what the buyer does on the buyer side. So in this example, BGE as a local utility would be the buyer. The legislature can buy what the buyer says. I don't see where the legislature or the PSC can control what the seller does. Now, at the PJM FERC level, those sellers are regulated utilities at the FERC level, and so PJM and FERC can control what they do to an extent, and they do control what they offer, the offers they make and what level they can be. But if we're just talking about what Maryland can do, they can't control what the seller does. It has to be controlled through what the buyer does.
So, and then the buyer, you mentioned that these would be 5-year contracts. Is that how it's drawn up, or is that how why did you come up? Why did you mention 5-year contracts?
5 years is a rule. It's not. I didn't mean to mention 5-year contracts. It's a 5-year commitment. So if BGE goes to PJM and says, I want to do FRR, PJM says, okay, you're now obligated to do this for 5 straight years.
You're obligated to do the FRR for 5 straight years.
Right.
That's
you don't
have,
have,
right.
Yeah, you can buy your capacity a year at a time. PJM doesn't care. You can buy it a year at a time. You can buy it in 5-year contracts. PJM doesn't care how you do it, but you're obligated to do this 5 years in a row.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Bill, and I really appreciate all your work on this. I think, though, I just want to kind of bring us back to, as I'm trying to unpack the market power issues and how this could be done and how we protect consumers and so on. There was a conversation we had last year when Stu was at one of these hearings, and this question about 5 years and are we bought in, or if we legislatively mandate an FRR, I think potentially it's different than if a utility elects an FRR. So right now, BGE could go elect an FRR if they wanted to right now, right? According to rules, they would just go do that. Nothing we're doing in this conversation changes that. And then they'd be stuck in it for 5 years, I think. You can confirm that. But let me just say the second part, because I'd like you to confirm this too. If we were to establish a state law that required some or all of our utilities to engage in an FRR, I think we also could establish a state law that rescinded that and or had a sunset on it or did something else, because what the PJM rules around FRRs actually say is they're committed for 5 years unless some I don't have it in front of me, some substantial policy change, some substantial change kind of in the circumstances, whatever the technical language is. And I asked Stu at the time, would a change in law be considered a change in circumstances? I don't know if he's still on this call. Yes, he is. Hi, Stu. And he said yes. So what I take away from that is, if we decide to go forward with an FRR, if that is the direction we go in, that we would have the ability as a legislature to establish it and then remove it, and or establish policy points that would remove it as a requirement in a way that an individual utility making that decision wouldn't. And so I just want to know, is that also your understanding of that, especially based on the confirmation from Stu at that meeting last year?
So the first part of your question about going into the FRR, I'm not aware of any difference it would make as far as whether a utility decided to do this on their own versus they were directed to do it by a state law or a commission order. As far as their obligation to do it 5 years in a row, you're certainly correct that there is language in the PJM tariff that says if a utility starts doing this, they have to do it 5 years in a row. If there's a change, and I think the best interpretation of it, if there's a change once that 5-year period starts, then they could potentially change course and not do it for 5 straight years. So that's an uncertainty. I think, like I said, I think a law that sort of set up that change to begin with would be, I'd have some concerns about whether that would be effective, because it's really looking for a change, I think, during the 5 years. But we wouldn't know until the 5 years was going on if a change in law actually happened. So that's my understanding of what those provisions might mean for our consideration here.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Bill, isn't there a federally mandated reliability requirement there? How would that impact that if we've got that 5 year? Would we not still have to live up to that particular clause?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And that clause, there's 2 parts to that, and the 2 parts are, one is for say for BGE, they have to procure. If BGE was doing this as an FRR, each year they'd have to come to PJM and say, I've procured enough megawatts to satisfy my total load. That's you can look at that as a federal requirement, that total load number. Mm-hmm. The second piece of that is a certain number of those megawatts would have to be local. They'd have to be within, they have to exist within the BGE service territory. That's because there's only so much transmission that can come into BGE. I mean, there's only so many wires there. And if BGE was trying to procure all their capacity from outside the service territory, there wouldn't be enough transmission capacity to bring that into the service territory. So PJM makes sure that that's all maintained in how the procurement is done. So yes, we'd have that obligation. And that would have to be met every 5 years. And that's why I talked about how you'd have an obligation to potentially be going back to a limited set of resources, either for your economic, to meet these reliability requirements, or for whatever environmental aspect you chose to put on this. You have to be careful about being forced to go back to a limited set of sellers to buy what you need to buy.
All right, thanks.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fields.
Thank you, Chairman.
And now if we can go to Ryan Opsel at the Maryland Energy Administration. Ryan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am Ryan Opsel. I'm the Policy Director over at MEA. Really the main message I think I'd like to communicate today is that we do have some time for careful consideration on this issue, and really the need for a thoroughly researched response to this long-term threat to state-level energy policymaking is quite important. Our current view is one of moderation, continues to be one of information gathering, and this especially pertains to the potential for the FRR option. I should, however, point out clearly that if the MOPR order remains in effect in its most onerous form, it will certainly be detrimental to our state's efforts to have a cleaner energy mix down the road. First of all, why do we have a little bit of time here? There are several legal challenges underway over the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago. These were all moved over from DC. It's a legally contentious order. It's possible one of these will succeed. In general, I don't really think you can appreciate this issue without breaking it down into its distinct time dimensions. So on this issue, it's important to understand the short-term ramifications are separate from the long-term ones. Since this conversation is centered around the ability of our state to continue to provide meaningful subsidization to preferred generation resources, so we can incentivize faster deployment of those clean energy resources, we can focus on these technologies, and they are namely wind and solar. When it comes down to it, there is extremely limited renewables participation in the capacity market auctions. This is demonstrated by reviewing the results of the 2018-2019 base residual auction. This is simply because the majority of renewable operators do not depend on revenue streams from the capacity market, but instead sell directly into the energy market. It's primarily energy market sales flowing to these developers and not capacity and ancillary services sales. What that means is these rules targeting renewable generators, and I would reiterate target, especially as has been mentioned before, the exclusion of any action on federal subsidies across other generation types. What that means is over the short term, renewable generation is essentially not really being deprived of capacity market revenues, since they typically do not pursue these as a primary revenue stream. Now, admittedly, on that point, information is very difficult to come by. This is not through malign intent, but it is within the competitive purview of renewable developers to maintain control over such information. As such, it's not freely available, and we are instead forced to rely on anecdotal and proxy evidence for that. It should be noted that existing resources, as have been mentioned previously, are exempt from the MOPR. So even though we have limited involvement by renewable developers, the ones that have been involved have already cleared or participated in an auction are exempt and will be able to continue. As for direct policy interventions by the state policy is primarily oriented towards the provision of subsidies to our preferred generation systems. And these are either direct subsidies or grants like MEA's solar grant program, or subsidies through an apparatus like our renewable portfolio standard, where preferred generation is awarded renewable energy credits. These systems of financial subsidies and others like them as the main financial instruments of state energy policy, providing these stable revenue streams to preferred clean energy developers are intact and they're not going anywhere. So when does this become a problem over time? And well, it's really difficult to say precisely, but it will become a major problem in the future, barring any significant alterations by on the MOPR order. So while there's limited involvement in the capacity market now, given our targets, our RPS targets, where we're going to have a grid that's 50% powered by renewables by 2030. And then there's also the probability that clean energy subsidies and incentives will increase from that point in the future as well. We could be looking at a grid that is more increasingly directly subsidized by the state, meaning more and more of our generation mix would actually be prevented from engaging in these capacity auctions. It's not too difficult to look ahead and see what that would mean when the grid is subsidized to the extent of 50 or 100% even, and essentially none of the generation would be able to effectively participate in the capacity market. If you couple that in with other states and PJM with similar incentives, this could be extremely problematic, as we would have to rely more and more also on PJM-wide capacity and not our own cleaner energy mix or the cleaner energy mix from other PJM states. In addition, as technology improves and we look for the potential of additional enabling technologies like utility scale battery storage, we would assume that more variable generation like wind and solar would have the ability to more successfully operate in the capacity market. This especially goes for a technology like battery storage, which would then mean we would also be providing those developers and generation types from an added revenue stream, making overall project economics not work out as well as they could. I also want to talk about the fixed resource requirement, which of course has been the subject of much debate and has been brought up a couple times on this panel. It is a potential avenue to mitigate the long-term detrimental impact that we're seeing from this MOPR ruling. But it's not something that should be rejected outright, but it is absolutely something that should be approached with caution. There are many unknowns with engaging in this option, and we would need to subject it to more critical scrutiny before making a decision. First, going FRR, it's not like selecting it from a menu option and then you're there. The decision has to be made in advance, and then we are locked in for a given period of time. I understand there might be some contention over that, but it would still be a commitment. But before we'd actually have this market in place, it would be the result of a bargaining and negotiating process that we would determine what to include, what would be capable of including, and perhaps most importantly, we would need the necessary expertise on hand to properly develop and structure our state level procurement. We would need to be careful with this. This will impact not only the functioning of our capacity in the state, but it will bring to the fore issues of competitiveness and market power, owing to the potentially limited number of firms that would be participating in these state level auctions, especially in particular LDAs and the individual zones within those LDAs. It would seem the potential exists to mitigate the market power concerns to a limited extent. However, they would not be eliminated. We would have to determine the area, whether we would even have enough generation there to meet our requirements, determine how much generation would need to be indigenous to that LDA, and how much could potentially be imported from PJM. All of this would feed into a complicated negotiating process, and that will require a great deal of commitment and engagement by many experts on the subject. So second, executing the FRR option at this time, it would not necessarily be a boon for renewables. As previously mentioned, we do not have enough renewable energy in the state in order to come anywhere close to meeting our capacity obligations as they would stand if we went with this option. We don't have enough when you take into account our RPS obligations, much of which in the tier 1 non-carve out category consists of RECs purchased outside of Maryland, meaning the generation is not in state. We have a deficit of renewables that would be able to provide capacity in the state. That means in-state generators are currently receiving capacity payments from PJM auctions will still be a major component of the in-state capacity resource mix, which of course does mean fossil fuel generators. The bulk of our capacity payments over the near and medium terms would most likely be going towards these generators, which would seemingly be counter to the goals laid out here today, which is to mitigate the negative impact of the order on in-state renewables and to further development of our preferred generation mix. There also seems to be a question as to how much control we would have as a state over assigning value to capacity resources and over choosing what would be allowed in the auctions in the first place. Third, we have also concerns on pricing and the ultimate cost to consumers. The limited information that is available is not particularly encouraging. The independent market monitor for PJM monitoring analytics did complete a report earlier in the year focused specifically on Maryland. In this report, they examined 6 scenarios and the potential pricing outcomes from those scenarios. The IM had to do 6 scenarios because of the inherent complexity of the energy landscape in Maryland, with multiple LDAs and significant portions of imported electricity from the broader PJM network. Out of the 6 scenarios examined, 5 resulted in higher prices to ratepayers, and we see either negative or mixed results from the other FRR studies conducted for other states. And finally, on the issue of other states that have executed the FRR option, we would caution drawing direct inferences to the Maryland case. First, these are a mix of different geographies, congestion zones, sizes in terms of customers served, and differences in the status as regulated, deregulated states. These are significant and directly applicable variables that would need to be addressed in order to draw proper conclusions from these other jurisdictions. So in conclusion, once again, this is a very serious issue, and we're not flat out rejecting something like this, like the FRR. What we are saying, as said in the beginning, we do have time for some careful, thoughtful consideration on this subject. There's no need to engage our state, one of our state's LDAs in a contractual obligation. when we could take more time to research the issue more thoroughly, especially while all of these various moving parts from the filings to the orders to the legal challenges are still in development. In addition, I would also point out that there are some different alternatives to the FRR that I don't think we've really explored yet. And this could be something like a forward clean energy market, which clean energy for delivery at a future date, or even the exploration of some form of carbon pricing and how that might be used to address the issue. So those are our thoughts on this particular topic, and thank you. I welcome any questions.
Are there any questions? Going once? Going twice? Thank you very much. And that appears to conclude our agenda for today. I want to take this opportunity. First of all, I want to thank my Senate counterparts, Senator Feldman, Vice Chairman Feldman, Senator Augustine, Senator Jennings, Senator Hershey. On behalf of Delegate Brooks and Delegate Charkoudian, we thank you all for joining us, and also to our presenters as well as the other interested stakeholders. This is a very important and complicated issue. We thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come and participate in this discussion. Yes, there's a lot going on. You know, some decisions I think will become clearer as we get a little further down the road. And we will deal with it as it comes up. In the meantime, be on the lookout for us. You'll be hearing from us again, probably in a month or so. Some of us are going to be a little busy in the next couple of weeks, but it'll slow down again, and we'll pull this group back together. Everyone have a great evening. If you need to get anything to me, please send it, or to any of the legislators. You can send it through to our offices, or you can send it to my office. We'll make sure everybody gets what they need to get. Thank you again very much, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Chairman Davis.
Take care, guys.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you.